Mas Anas will also record this Zoom, right?
Yeah.
It happens directly to YouTube. It is recorded in that way.
No, we are live on YouTube, and I'll make the I'll make Bakarina as host, and let's see what happens.
Okay. So who's going to be the host, Anas?
Karina.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. If I'm the host for the YouTube.
I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, you wanna try it first? Okay, okay, okay.
Okay, just somebody needs to be ready to spotlight.
Yeah.
Quick test, I guess.
Now Bakarina is the host,
Mm-hmm.
and
So Karina, you know how to do the spotlight, right?
Yeah, I know. When I have to stop my screen when Megan's speaking.
When Megan comes up.
Okay.
I
Maybe
see
at
it
10.
streaming fine on the YouTube right now, so I think we're all ready.
I'm gonna stop my screen sharing at 10.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then you spotlight Megan.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at 10.
okay, yeah,
Oh.
the live stream is fine. Oh my goodness, thank you.
Okay. Good.
Deg-degan ya.
All right.
Mas Anas,
Apa-apa.
Mas Anas, sorry, but do you have options to spotlight Megan? Because I don't have it.
Wait. Okay, yeah, the live stream is fine. Oh my goodness, thank you.
Okay. Good.
Deg-degan ya.
No, I don't have the spotlight.
Sorry, but
Anas,
me
maybe,
too. I don't.
maybe at this time, maybe if we can ask you to be the host, because I don't think we can figure it out right now.
Mm-hmm.
You seem to be able to, we'll have to do it maybe next time. I'm just worried it's going to be a bit of a mess if we haven't figured it out now.
Add me as
So-
co-host, please.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
Karina, can you?
Oh, okay. I'm done. Oh, Megan. Do you have any option for that, Mas Anas?
For the spotlight.
Yeah, for Megan
oh,
and
no.
Ajeng.
You need to make Anas a host.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Okay.
Okay, so I think
Make me a co-host, maybe.
Savita, sorry. BA is Bachelor of Arts, right? And MA is Master of Arts.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Ajeng,
Yeah.
Ajeng, you will not be
Yeah.
introducing Savita.
Yeah, I will
Okay.
I'll be reading the bios.
Yeah, so don't worry.
Okay.
You just need to come up when Megan introduce you, but you don't actually have to say anything, and then you turn off again, and then Savita comes on, and then Megan will introduce Savita, and you'll
okay.
come on later for the
For
moderating.
the discussions. Okay.
Yeah, should be in the Zoom script. Okay, Grace
So who
is.
should be the host?
So you're the host. Good. Thank you, Anas.
Okay, so I'll do the spotlight.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So Grace, are you with us now?
I am. I was trying to figure out how to put in a background.
Oh, good. You did it. Perfect.
So we're going to start just in 2 minutes. So there'll be a moment where I invite you to turn your camera on and then to say a few words before we begin. Is that good with you? Okay, great. Thank you, Grace.
That's just fine. And then otherwise, I'm going to have my camera off because our bandwidth just can't handle it.
Yeah, most of us will be keeping our camera off unless we are in the spotlight. So you'll join the rest of us in that regard. Thank you.
Perfect.
Megan, I think that's a good point. Actually, maybe we should ask everybody to turn off their camera if possible, because I think it does save on the bandwidth, right?
More on an individual person's level.
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's okay for our stream. It doesn't affect the.
I'm sorry. And who will tell the audience that we have the interpretation mode?
Megan.
I will be.
Yeah. Yeah. But Ajeng, you will have like 5 minutes to respond to Savita's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But so after Savita's finished, then you will come on immediately and give the response. And then after that, Savita will come on for the Q&A.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I think we're going to let people in.
Okay. Yeah.
So everybody turn off their camera.
Hello, everyone. Selamat pagi kepada teman-teman di Indonesia. Good evening to those who are joining us from the United States. My name is Megan Hewitt. I'm the Executive Director of the American Institute for Indonesian Studies. APHIS, if you are not already familiar, is a consortium of American universities working to foster public education, research exchange, and collaboration between Indonesia and the United States. I'm joined today by our US-based partners, Tracing Patterns Foundation and the Smithsonian Institution Asian Cultural History Program, as well as our Indonesia-based partners, Institute Konservasi and Museum Ceria. This is a truly collaborative effort, and it is my honor to welcome you all to this first session of Museums of the for the 21st Century webinar series. M21 for short is a program which brings together curators and scholars from the US and Indonesia who specialize in the future direction of museums in 3 critical areas: collection, exhibition, and research, engagement with the family and youth, as well as art conservation. The M21 project began in December 2022 as a professional development program consisting of in-person workshops in 3 inclusion institutions, including Museum Textile Jakarta, Museum Provinsi Kalimantan Barat in Pontianak, and Museum Balanga in Provinsi Kalimantan Tengah. This webinar series is designed to disseminate results from the in-person course modules that were conducted in December of last year, as well as address additional challenges faced by Indonesian museums for wider public audiences. The M21 program is made possible through generous funding by the US Embassy in Jakarta and additional support by the Indonesian Ministry of Education, Culture, Research, and Technology. The first session of this three-part webinar series focuses on the subject of education to discuss how museums in the 21st century engage with audiences in creating relevant and participatory public programs. Relevance is a key word in the 21st century. As today the world changes very fast, it is imperative for a museum to always be relevant for the audience they serve. Before I introduce our speakers, please allow me to make a few announcements about the structure and logistics of our session today. For our Zoom audience, we are pleased to offer simultaneous translations from English into Indonesian language, provided by our very talented interpreter, Ana Rahmawati, joining us from Kalimantan today. Terima kasih, Mbak Ana. In order to select the Indonesian translation, there's an icon for interpretation located at the bottom of the screen, where you can toggle between languages. And jangan lupa untuk memute yang audio yang asli biar nggak berkelahi. This webinar is also being live streamed on YouTube, and a recording will also be posted on Tracing Patterns YouTube channel after the event. The structure of this session will consist of a 45-minute presentation by our guest speaker, Savita Monie, a 10-minute response from our moderator, Ajeng Arainikasih, followed by a Q&A session where our moderator will direct questions from the audience directly to our guest speaker. The audience is welcome to put your questions into the Zoom chat at any time throughout our discussion today. Both English and Indonesian questions, perfectly fine. And we will also be taking questions from the YouTube live stream. Now it is my honor to introduce our speakers for today. If I can please invite Grace, Ajeng, and Savita to join me on the screen. Just a moment for everyone to enter. And Grace, if we could have Grace also be spotlighted. Thank you. Welcome. I will begin by introducing each one of you. We'll start with Grace. Grace Clegg is Assistant Cultural Attaché for the US Embassy in Jakarta. She has been instrumental in facilitating the M21 project in Indonesia. So before I share any more about our next guests, I would like to invite Grace to say a few words about the M21 project. Grace, please.
Thank you such, Megan. Selamat pagi, Bapak, Ibu, and everyone from the United States and beyond. I'm honored to be here today. As I've been kindly introduced, I have been the program manager on the U.S. Embassy side for this project, and we couldn't be more pleased and proud with what the Museums of the 21st Century program has already achieved. As has already been described, it was some fantastic work done in person, both in Jakarta, but also in Kalimantan. And so I'm just going to say a few words as we get started today as to why this project is so important. First of all, from the US government perspective, it reflects our commitment to supporting Indonesia's goals to conserve and showcase its cultural and natural heritage, and, if I can turn a phrase, to level up its museums to become a world-class network of institutions. We've been proud to be a partner with Indonesia on its conservation journey, going back as far as 20 years and beyond through such programs as the Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation, and then this more in-depth, focused program that is allowing us to help level up the people on the ground, the conservators, the museum managers, to create not only collections that are better preserved, but to bring in more people to be engaged in part of the narrative. So number one, it is incredibly important for us to be partners in that journey, and we're pleased to do so. And this program was an important component of that. Second, we really appreciate the work of the Museums of the 21st Century team to make this program locally focused. Too often you have projects where American experts will come in, say, this is how we do it, and that method doesn't necessarily work in the local context. What works at the Smithsonian and what works at the Met might not work in Kalimantan Barat. And so we really credit the team for their efforts to pay attention to what the needs were, pay attention to what the resources are and the interest with the local partners, and truly making this into an opportunity to share knowledge that is relevant. And then third, and near and dear to my heart as a cultural affairs officer, wherein we really do have a commitment to both education and diversity, equity, and inclusion and accessibility. And that is the education component. They could have just stopped with conservation and curation, but adding the education part, getting that relevance for the audience, getting people into the museums to appreciate, to celebrate, and to have a role in preserving Indonesia's cultural and natural heritage. That was key. That was the secret sauce. And so I'm really looking forward to the discussion today to hear kind of what came from it, the lessons learned, and where we can take it next. Because I can just say, speaking personally, as a child, I loved going to museums. And what I wanted out of the museum was an interactive experience. I wanted to have fun while I learned. As an adult, when I went to museums, I wanted a narrative that would kind of bring all of these pieces, whether art or artifact, together to understand why am I here and why is this important. And now today, as a mother of a young child, I want a place where I can change a diaper and I want ramps for my stroller. And all of these are elements that get interwoven with the curation, with the conservation to make museums a place for everybody. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to our experts. Thank you all for joining us and thank you for your interest in this project.
Thank you so much, Grace, for that wonderful introduction. This really is, you've resonated with so much that has made this project meaningful for APHIS as well. And being able to collaborate with such a diverse group of partners across the US and Indonesia is really a special event. So thank you again for foregrounding all of these wonderful points. Let me then now introduce our moderator for today's session, Ajeng Arainikasih. She has a Master of Arts and is a museologist. She is a scholar who teaches museum studies at Universitas Indonesia. She is also a PhD candidate from Universiteit Leiden in the Netherlands, and her research focuses on decolonizing museums. She is founder and self-proclaimed lady boss of Museum Ceria and an independent creative consultant on museums and historic houses. Museum Ceria focuses on children in museums. So Grace, we are thinking about mothers and their children and the whole community involved in going to these museums. So from exhibitions for children's to education about public programs, Ibu Ajeng is doing that good work in Jakarta at Museum Ceria. The last bit of introduction and our featured guest for today, our guest speaker today is Savita Monie. Welcome, Savita. Savita is Program Manager for International Initiatives and the Indian Conservation Fellowship Program in Education at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Previously, she has worked at the Brooklyn Museum in New York, the Asia Society in New York, and the Victoria and Albert Museum in London, UK. She has also consulted on strategic cultural programs for the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, Savita specializes in projects that create cultural partnerships and help develop educational programs on the preservation of cultural heritage in countries in Asia and Africa, most especially. Her interest is in helping museums across the world to better understand their local audiences, as well as to find ways to engage them in preserving cultural heritage resources. Savita has a Bachelor of Arts in History from the University of Bombay, a Master of Arts in Cultural Studies from the University of Bombay, and a second Master of Arts in History from New York University. Savita Monie will present on to us discussing the link between and identity and demonstrate how institutions can create programs for youth audiences to help them better understand the importance of preserving their country's cultural heritage. So with one minor note, if we could also remind our audience to mute themselves during the presentation, and please feel free to place your questions in the chat on Zoom or on the YouTube live stream, and Ibu Ajeng will be conveying them to Ibu Savita later after her talk. So Savita, please join us. We will let you have the stage. We're very honored to have you join us today. So please.
Terima kasih, Megan. I'm so pleased to be part of this lovely panel and to share with you my background and my work with museum education. I have to say, as a teenager, I lived in Indonesia, in Jakarta, for 3 years. And so I have very fond memories of that place. And I'm so pleased to be collaborating with all your esteemed institutions, and the work you do in Indonesia is very close to my heart. I'm going to just share my screen so that I can start my presentation. So I want to start by sharing a little bit about my work. I work in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and I work on international initiatives with museums in Asia and Africa. And the goal of my work is to bring the Metropolitan Museum to the furthest corners of the globe. And the way we do that is through training programs where we invite conservators and curators from institutions in Asia and Africa to come to the Met to be trained. But we also do work in these countries. And so we take scholars and curators and conservators and educators from the Met, workshops and seminars in Asia, in museums in India and in various parts of Africa. And the idea is that we can all learn from each other. And everything we do is collaborative and helps us all become better institutions. So that's a little bit about my work. But I want to now give you an idea of the Metropolitan Museum, where my work is currently located. So the Metropolitan Museum, as you all know, is a leading institution in New York that showcases 5,000 years of human history through art. The goal of the museum is that anyone who walks into this museum, and this is an image of the Great Hall, which is at the center of the museum, but the goal is that anyone who walks through these doors into this Great Hall will find some part of their culture or their history or their identity in this vast institution. The museum is created in a very European model. And I'll get into a little bit of what I mean by that. But when you come in, you enter this great hall, which is at the center, and it has these high ceilings and these huge balconies. There are these large vases with flowers that are changed regularly. And it's a very kind of awe-inspiring place. It's a place that makes you realize as soon as you come in that you're going to engage with something that is fantastic, that is, it will take you to places you haven't traveled before. And it'll be an impressive, fascinating, and perhaps educational experience. When you enter the Great Hall, if you turn right, you will see the Egyptian galleries showcasing art from ancient Egypt. Now, the Egyptian collection is a very important collection for the museum because it was created right in the beginning of the 20th century, and it was created in collaboration with the government of Egypt. So the Metropolitan Museum and the government of Egypt excavated many sites in Egypt. And as part of that excavation project, the Egyptian government decided to give the Metropolitan Museum half of the objects that were removed or that were excavated. So the Metropolitan Museum has a very strong Egyptian collection. I think it's one of the largest outside of Egypt. For example, there is this large temple in the middle of the Egyptian gallery. And this temple was actually going to be submerged when the Aswan Dam was built. And so the Egyptian government invited the Metropolitan Museum to dismantle this large temple and reassemble it brick by brick in New York. And so this is one of the main attractions of many visitors to the museum. Now, if from the Great Hall you turn left, you will see the spectacular collection of Greek and Roman art. And this is also a very important collection at the museum. It was formed in the middle part of the 20th century. And it's one of the largest collections of Greek and Roman art outside of Europe. And there are many, many masterpieces in this collection. And then if you go up the grand staircase of the Great Hall, you will see the museum's collection of European paintings. This is also a very renowned collection. It's a beautiful collection that covers every major European artist, especially the Renaissance period. And I'm describing this to you because I want to share that the museum was created in a very Western model for museums, where there were two bulwarks of Western civilization, ancient Egypt and Greek and Roman art on either side of the base of the Great Hall. And then you climb up the grand staircase to see one of the pinnacles of Western civilization, which is European paintings and the Renaissance period. Now, the museum collects art from all parts of the world. It's 5,000 years of art and throughout every geography. But if you wanted to find non-Western art within the museum, you would have to go to many places because many departments collect non-Western art. For example, if you wanted to find Indonesian art, you would have to travel to the South and Southeast Asian galleries to see an image from Java, see the sculpture from Java, of this Buddhist sculpture from Java on my left. Or if you wanted to see this textile fragment, you would have to go to the Islamic galleries. If you wanted to see this gamelan instrument, you would have to go to the musical instruments galleries. If you wanted to see this bronze sculpture from the ancient, I think it's from Sulawesi, but it's an ancient sculpture, you would have to go to the Rockefeller Wing, which shows objects from indigenous cultures that includes Africa and the ancient Americas. And if you want to see this image of the Javanese Ganesha, you would have to go again to the South and Southeast Asian galleries. So as you can see, for non-Western art, the collection has been spread out throughout the museum. It is not in one place and it is not in one collection. So this is where education, the education department comes into play, and it's very important because education programs makes the connection between art and young audiences for every culture across the globe. So the goal of the education department is to connect with people from every part of the globe, and everyone who comes into the museum should have some program that helps them understand the art better. And I show you this image of something that we call Met Fest, which is basically like a party on the steps of the museum. And the idea is to show everybody in the neighborhood and all our visitors that this museum is an accessible place. It shouldn't be an intimidating place. And it's an inviting place where you can come in and you can, if you open yourself up, you can learn about all the cultures of the world and also find some part of your own identity and your own background in there. So one of the main focuses of the education department is engaging young people. And the museum spends a lot of time thinking about how to bring young people through its doors, because the museum is not a natural place for young people. And when I say young people, we have a wide range of programs, but I'm basically going to talk about teenage audiences and college students, and they're not a natural audience for the museum. They don't naturally come to the museum. They find it boring. They sometimes find it too intimidating. And so the museum really tries hard to engage them. And one of the programs we do is something called Teens Take the Met, which is a program where we invite high school students from the neighborhood, from all the schools in the neighborhood, to come to the Met, and it's held 2 times a day. And they basically take over the museum. So they come into the museum and they have activities just for teens in galleries throughout the museum. They have dance parties, we have DJs, we have art making and craft making, there's a snack area. And the idea is to show young people, especially teen audiences, that the museum is not an intimidating place. It's not a place where you have to act differently. It's a place for you. And this is a way for us to kind of connect with young people and invite them and make them feel that the Met is a place that they can return to. Another program we have is something called Drop-in Drawings, where we invite people, young audiences, to come to the museum, and they're given a sketchbook and some sketch pens and charcoal pencils, and we ask them to draw works of art. And this is an important way to connect to art, because when you draw a work of art, you start paying attention to the details. You start understanding the form. You might even think of the function of this work of art. The goal here is not to really teach drawing or to teach fine arts or art making, but the goal is to help a person connect with the art. And so everyone can try, and everyone, they're not really judged on the final product. They're all encouraged to try drawing or sketching any work of art that catches their fancy. And this is a very popular program that brings in young people on a regular basis. Another way that the Met tries to connect with young people is by using social media. And we have something called the Met Collective. And the Met Collective is, it's a Instagram-based group. And the idea is to give the people that are part of the Met Collective, which are college students, the opportunity to be the curators, to be the educators, and to use that Instagram handle to kind of showcase what they like to see at the Met, and kind of be the spokespeople for the Met to a larger community. So the Met Collective Instagram handle is controlled entirely by the people who are part of the collective. They're college students. Anyone can join. We have an administrator that monitors the content, but it's the group that decides what should go on Instagram, and they're the ones who create the reels. And this is a great way for the museum to connect with people, and also for them to have their own voice or their own platform to showcase their take on the museum's content. So I'll give you an example on the next slide, and in the chat we'll link it to their Instagram page. But this is an example of the kind of work that the Met Collective does. So we had this famous artist called Alice Neal. Her work is on the left, and she used to paint various places in New York. She was a New York-based artist. She grew up here, and she used to paint various places and buildings and parks in New York. And what the Met Collective did is they took her paintings and connected it to actual buildings that inspired her work. And so they had made this wonderful reel where you can look at the Alice Neal's paintings, and then you can look at these various places in New York that she traveled to and was inspired to make those paintings. So it was a very creative way to connect the work of the Met with the larger city. We also have something called College Night. And College Night is basically a party for young college students. Many of you may have heard of Gala. It's this very prestigious event that the Met has every year where we invite celebrities and Hollywood stars to come to the Met. It's a very fancy event that is very exclusive, and it's all over the newspapers and all over the celebrity pages. And so College Night is a similar event, but for college students. So we've tried to make a kind of Met Gala for college students where they come, they're fully dressed up, and they participate in the museum. They have food and drinks, and the galleries are open. And it's a way for college students to feel like this is a place that they can celebrate, they can bring their friends to, and it also gives them an opportunity to see the art and to basically be part of something that is larger than what they're used to. So it's a very successful event. It's held every year. And so if we step back, what the education department, what the philosophy of the department is that if you make young people feel comfortable in the museum, then they are willing to engage with the art and learn more. So a lot of what we do is make the museum less intimidating for young people, encourage them to come in. They may come in just for an event, they may come in just for a party, but once they feel comfortable within the walls of the museum, they are willing to come in more often and engage with the art and learn more. And so this is why we do all these outreach programs to bring people into the museum and have the museum be a place that they can interact with on their own terms. So it's not a place that's intimidating or told what to do or they have to behave differently. We try to make it very accessible for young people and make it very friendly. And this has proved to be very useful in a way to get them to engage with the art and learn more about not only the art, but about themselves. Another important part of museum education is really using art as a tool for teaching. And what the museum does is that the museum takes its role as a teaching tool very seriously. And what we do is we give teachers the resources to engage their students with the art. So we help the teachers think about how to use the art as a way to teach about whatever is in their curriculum. And that helps the students engage with the art. And the way this program works is we create something called a teaching resource, which we share with the teachers. The teachers use the resource in their classrooms for discussions with their students. And then they bring the students into the museum. And this is basically for high school students that we create this program. And then they bring their students into the museum. And once they're in the museum, they have a better understanding of the art that they're seeing because they've already had conversations about it in their classroom. So the gallery becomes a place and the art becomes a place where they learn to think more critically about the cultures and the subjects that they're learning. And they also learn, it makes everything much more tangible because they're actually seeing objects and they're connecting with the material that they're learning about rather than just what's in their textbooks. So I'm now going to walk you through what this teacher resource looks like. And I'm going to use the galleries for Islamic art. So these galleries were redone in 2011. They were completely transformed. And we created this teacher resource that goes with these galleries. So like I said, the teachers will use this resource to talk about the material with their students in their classrooms, and then bring the students to the museum so that they can see the actual objects that they were discussing and the themes that they were discussing through the objects. So it's using the objects as a tool for teaching. And so this resource, I'm showing you what the resource does sort of more in depth. And basically what this resource does is it says that these galleries can be used to convey these themes. So the first topic is Islam and religious art. And so these are the kind of main main takeaways that the student will get after going through this module. The student will learn to identify key tenets of Islam and important figures and events in early Islamic history. The student will also learn to recognize ways works of art reflect and support religious ideas and practices. So for example, this is a folio from a Quran, and the student will have had the discussion in the classroom and then can come and see the object and have a better understanding of the object. Here's another image that's part of this module, which is an image of an Indian emperor getting ready for his prayers. And this is another image that's also part of this teaching resource, which is a stand for a Quran. And so as you can see, these objects are ways to understand the role of religion in Islamic cultures. The second kind of topic that this resource uses is Arabic script and calligraphy. And what these objects try to convey is helps the student understand why calligraphy is important, identify the function and the visual characteristics of key scripts, and recognize ways that calligraphers use shapes of letters to decorate and convey messages. And the gallery has many, many calligraphy objects that showcase calligraphy. I'm just giving you some examples. These are some of the objects within the gallery that will help the discussion with the students. The third topic that the resource conveys is geometric design in Islamic art. And here, these objects are used to understand the role of geometric design in the art of the Islamic world, recognize ways in which featured objects of the exhibit show symmetry, two-dimensionality, and an illusion of infinity. And so you can see that the resource is not only to teach culture or social sciences, but also help the student understand math and geometry. So it's a very wide, the application of the resource is intentionally very wide, so that the teachers can use these objects to talk about many subjects that they're discussing in their classroom. So this module focuses on geometric design. And here are some of the objects that speak to that topic. This is actually a stone jali from India, which is carved in a very hard sandstone. So it's quite a spectacular object. The fourth topic that the research talks about is science and the art of the Islamic world. And here, these objects in this collection talk about innovations in astronomy and astrology, the importance of scientific inquiry, and helps the student understand how the preservation and dissemination of knowledge was so important to Islamic cultures. And these are some of the images of objects that are part of this discussion. This, for example, is an important manuscript that talks about various scientific methods from Iran. The fifth topic that's covered in this resource is courtly splendor in the Islamic world. And it helps to identify how courtly objects reflect the convergence of cultures, and how it also shows the importance of royal patronage in the identity and opulence of artworks. And so you can see, as I've mentioned before, that this resource is meant to tackle a wide range of subjects, so that the teachers can have conversations about the importance of patronage, the importance of courts, so they can inform subjects such as history and geography, all folded into one resource. This, for example, is a tent from Turkey that is hung on a wall to kind of give the sense of a mosque into a palace space. The sixth topic covered in this resource is called From City to the Step, and it's art beyond the royal court. And this actually shows how artifacts are excavated and how teaches students to understand how customs and activities and environment inform life in old cities. And the museum has very interesting examples. For example, this is a complete room, a medieval room from a Syrian house that was kind of broken up and reassembled within the museum. And all the objects are from that particular house in Syria. We also have lots of excavations from a site, an ancient site called Nishapur in Iran. And so there are a lot of pottery and shards and a lot of tile work. And so the students really get a sense of what these old cities looked like, how the people lived, and what their daily lives were about. And then the last topic within this resource is trade and artistic exchange. And so in this topic, the student learn how to understand trade and cultural ties between these various cultures across the globe. And they also learn how to identify objects. Why does something look Iranian? Why does something look Chinese? Why does something look from India? So they get this kind of vocabulary that makes them identify objects. This, for example, is one of the ceramics that is part of this topic. And then here's a painting that actually shows some ancient trade routes and how these ships moved from Europe and from Asia and Africa and carried goods and services. And so it really gives the students a sense of the information on their textbook. It really brings it alive for them, and they really use these objects as a point for critical inquiry and for further discussion. So that was one example of how the museum connects, or the education department in the museum connects with teachers. But we also use other ways to connect with audiences. So the museum, for example, when we have galleries that focus on a particular culture, like Islamic art, we use performances to showcase that culture. So it gives the audiences a more holistic view of the culture, not just the visual arts, but also the music and the poetry. So for example, here with the Islamic galleries, we invite young poets to come and express their poetry through spoken word events. We also invite musicians from various parts of the globe to come into the museum and perform at either in the auditorium and sometimes even within the gallery. So there's a whole immersive experience that really gives you a sense of these cultures. Another way that the museum really tries to engage with audiences is through our digital platform. And this is a very important resource for us because many people actually engage with the museum completely online. They're unable to visit New York and physically be at the museum, but there's a lot of resources that we put online that enable people to visit the metmuseum.org. I encourage you all to visit it. And there are articles, there are features, but there are many digital features that are very creatively made to bring these objects to life. And I'm going to share an example of a YouTube video that was created. This is a very important object in the Islamic galleries. It's a minrab, and every tile was brought from the Middle East and reassembled in this gallery. So it's a very beautiful piece. It's actually from Samarkand. It's a very beautiful piece. And the video that I'm about to share with you talks about calligraphy, and it really brings alive this calligraphy. It shows you why it is important, how it was used in mosques in the region, and how it was created. So I'm going to share the video in a minute. I just wanted to end with one slide and then share the video. I just want to circle back to why museum education is so important. And it's important to all our institutions all over the globe. It's important because it's a way to connect with young audiences. And when you connect with young people, you make them into lifelong learners, and they visit the museums again and again. They bring their own children to the museum. And so young audiences is a very important demographic for the Metropolitan Museum, but for every institution. It's a way to keep culture alive and a way for people to find their own identity. So I thank you. I'm just going to ask Karina if she could share. I'll stop sharing my screen and ask her to share the video, and then I'll be happy to take questions or have any further discussion. Thank you.
Karina, I think that we may not be able to.
السماوات وما في الأرض
Thank you.
من ذا الذي يشفع عنده إلا بإذنه يعلم ما بين أيديهم وما خلفهم ولا يحيطون بشيء من علمه إلا بما شاء وسع كرسيه السماوات والأرض ولا يؤوده حفظهما وهو العلي العظيم لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم.
So as you can see from that video, the digital department does very creative things with the objects, and there are many other such features at the metmuseum.org website. So I encourage you all to go there and check and have a look. And thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Savita, for your wonderful presentations, and also from Grace's opening. I can like respond it. I remember myself and my own families because of these teen programs. I have 3 daughters. One of them is a teenager already. She is 12 years old. And the other daughters are still 7 and 3 years old. So it's easier to bring the children to museums to play with me than the oldest sister, because she said, I am old enough to go with you, Mom. So I think it is important for museums. I know in Indonesian museums, there are many visitors, many young adults came to the museum. But I think most of them are only taking pictures, selfies, making Instagram reels for their own content of social medias, but not really engaging with the collections, not really engaging with the content of the museum. So I think as museum professionals in Indonesia, we really need to do something to bring or to make what already there. Sorry for the sound. We need to do something for them, so they're not only coming for their own content not related to the museum, but also make something more connect. Because as Savita said, that if they are comfortable, they will be willing to engage and learn more. And it is important for them, for us to have them as the audience, because they will be the lifelong learners, and will be the one who will preserve our heritage in the future. So I think that this is really time for us to do something with our teen audience. So we also have to know that they're characters, I think, because they are think that they are grown ups, but they're not really actually that grown ups. Particularly for maybe middle school students, or yeah, junior high school students. They don't want to go with families anymore, so they want to go with friends. They want to do something cool for them. So we really have to involving them in the museums and create the programs together. So I think we already have several questions here. The first question is from Hafni to Savita. What is your approach to do the research for creating education programs for young visitors? As you know, as you know, the youth is having. I'm sorry. The question is in Indonesia, so I have to translate it. The youth have different interests, easily change their interest, and it is really difficult to make them connect with the museum, with the programs that the museum offer. So what approach and research do you do with your younger audience to make them connect with your museum?
Yeah, thank you. That is it's a very important point that we all struggle with, is how to bring young people on a regular basis to the museum. What we do is we take a lot of advice from young people. So we often have focus groups and research groups where we invite young people to tell us what is interesting to them and how to make art more relatable to them. And then the second thing we do is, like I said before, we try to make the museum a place that is not intimidating, a place that they can come with their friends. For Teens Take the Met, for example, we encourage them to come without their parents. They come with their friends. We encourage them to come often. We have something called Teen Fridays from 6 to 8, from 5 to 8 actually. They can just come and hang out in the museum. There we give them snacks. There's a place where they can sit around and listen to music. And we also offer them a chance to look through the galleries. So I think the key is to connect with them often, to make sure that the place is not intimidating or boring, and then to use their language. So we use social media. We have other young people actually talk about the art. So we train young people and they become the spokesperson for the art. And like the Met Collective, for example, we just let them host that Instagram page and they create the content in that Instagram page. So that way we're using them to connect with other people of their age. So all these devices are very crucial. I think the key is to just make it accessible, to be creative about how you involve young people into your institutions. I think, and the idea is not to teach them or invite them, not to speak to them, but to kind of bring them along in the journey. And the more you do that, the more they'll be able to connect. And I have to say, once people come in and they find something in the museum that they like and they can relate to, they come back very often.
interesting. Thank you, Savita from Hafni. And I also encourage you to write down your chat here, your question here in the chat, whether it's in English or in Indonesia. We got second questions from Dia. Is Hak. Sorry, I missed it through your talk, but for what age is your young program is for? Is there like a school visit for elementary school students? If yes, how do you keep it engaging for them? Thank you. From Dia, former kid museum educator in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so our education programs covers all ages. With the very young children, we have something called storytelling, where we find books that relate to art, and they come in for story time where they sit around in a circle and an educator reads a storybook that's somewhat related to the collection. And then we encourage their parents to take them to the galleries. For little older children, like elementary students, we do a lot of art making and a lot of drawing. That's a way to connect with them. And then as they get older, for middle school and high school students, we do these programs like the ones I outlined, where we have teens take them at Teen Fridays, drop-in drawings. We also have tours that are given to the museum, especially for teen audiences. So the educator really speaks in a manner that's relatable to teen audiences. And all these work in kind of conjunction with each other to engage this group.
There is also a question. Oh, there's a further questions. What kind of art making for elementary students, for example?
So for example, for the Chinese New Year, we had something called a Lunar New Year celebration day, during which they came and they learned to make paper lanterns. They do projects with clay. And then there was painting and drawing. They do kind of scissor work, cut work. So we have these kind of festival days where we showcase one culture or a few cultures. And so then they can come into the museum and we put these art making activities throughout the museum. So they're actually forced to go around the museum and engage with the art, even if they're by accident or by design. But then they also go to these various art making stations where they can learn and do some kind of creative activity. We also try to teach them about conservation. So we teach them sometimes through creative ways. We talk about materials, how different works of art use different materials to be, they're created with different materials. So we talk about clay, we talk about metal, we talk about wood. And so it's not always just talking about the art itself, it's also talking about other things that relate to the art as a way to engage young people.
Maybe continuing my questions myself, sorry about that. But you said before about giving them snacks in the museum. So it is coming for free for them during the Teen Fridays?
Yes, that's a big part of our accessibility. And the big part of our program is to make things free. Because when you want young people to come in, we try our hardest to make programs for youth audiences free so that they can come in without any kind of setbacks. They're not encumbered in any way for their experience.
So Friday 5 to 8 is free for youth. And how can you manage them? Should they see provide you some IDs that, oh, okay, you are
Yeah.
15, so you're free to enter?
Yes, so they have to have a school ID, or they basically come with their school IDs. They don't have to really register or RSVP. They can walk in, but they have to have some form of ID, and they don't have to have any adult with them. They come in on their own, but we have a lot of educators in the building at that time that help them with programs. And we give them certain areas where they relax, not near the art, where they're allowed to have snacks. And, you know, you have to feed young people, otherwise they won't learn. So we make sure to feed them first, and then we introduce subject matters.
Interesting. But if as adult wants to come to that museum during that night, they still have to pay, or it's not allowed for them because that's 10 Fridays.
No, they can come in, and then there's it depends. If you're a resident of New York and New Jersey, then you're allowed free, but otherwise you have to pay. So the museum is open on Fridays and Saturdays until 9 o'clock. So adults are allowed to come in.
Okay.
But the teen program is Teen Fridays, especially for teens. So teens are allowed free, but they have to have a school ID with them.
So that's what they call it, the public programs, because it's running every week.
Yeah.
And I have another question for you from Aditya Bayu. Hello, Savita. Thank you very much for the presentations. If I may ask, I have several questions. How do you think museums should approach this place that are not visually focused, but rather more tactile? Some tendencies I see in museum is that only seeing and being narrated with stories may not be very engaging for certain audience. In other words, do you have recommendation how audience can interact with artifacts beyond seeing them behind display glass?
Yeah, that is a very good point. You know, people like to touch things, especially young people like to touch things, and we always say don't touch things in the museum. But we do have something called a study collection, which are a group of objects that are not in the galleries, they're in our education spaces, and educators can bring them out, and the audience is allowed to touch them and feel them, to understand what the material feels like, to understand what the form feels like. We use that with young people, and we also use it with people that are visually challenged to help them interact with the art. And so we have a special collection called the Touch Collection that we bring out to do education programs with, where people can really feel and touch the art. Sometimes we'll also bring out, if we want to explain material to young audiences, then we'll bring out examples from the collection that are not the ones on display, but of similar materials, so that they can understand, you know, what clay feels like, what metal feels like, understand how different it is when you're working with these different materials. So we have a department of scientific research in the museum, and they do a lot of programs with materials. So basically connecting science to art and using art as a way to understand science. And that's a big part of our education, is not just teaching audiences about art, but also teaching them about other subjects, especially science.
I still have several more questions for you in the chat room. And it is from Amanda Teha. Hi, Savita, Monie. I have always admired the resources that are provided by the Met, either from the entertaining and educating videos from YouTube, Met publications, and short videos from Instagram. My current favorite is the Rajiv Takes the Met series. Is Rajiv Takes the Met a program made by the Met Collective? And if I may know the thought process behind how the series is created, because I am in awe of how engaging the series is and the collaboration between public figures, curators, social media, and the museum itself. Thank you very much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that is a very interesting program. Rajiv Takes the Met. It's Rajiv is a social commentator that lives in New York. That's not particularly an art historian, and they've invited him. I think he has a TV series as well, and so they invited him, and he comes into the museum. He looks at various galleries, and he talks to the curators, and they have a very informal conversation. That program is created by our digital department. So our digital department works in conjunction with education and with the curatorial and with all the other conservation departments, but they also are content creators. So they come up with ideas on how to use digital means to explain the art to the public. And they're very creative. They create some amazing, Instagram reels. They use YouTube. You can find all those resources on our website. There's some of them are quite in depth, and some of them are more short kind of interactions that focus on just a particular object or just a short theme. Sometimes they have a whole exhibition walkthrough. And the idea really for digital is that you should be able to have a very strong and whole museum experience online without actually being able, because obviously we can't have everybody come to the museum. It's, in New York, and it's not easy to get to, and it's not accessible to many people, but they're still interested in our collection. So the digital platform is a very important part of the museum's mission to engage people. I too am a fan of that series. I think they're very creative in the way that they're able to bring celebrities and connect them with the art.
Thank you, Savita. There is a question from from Andika Dewara. He is from the Museum of Modern and Contemporary Art in Nusantara, or Museum Macan, Jakarta. It's an art museum also. He said that it is a fascinating presentation. Maintaining relationship is challenging for museums in Indonesia, particularly with schools and communities. Is there a specific program at the Met Museum that focus on having to outreach to educational institutions? I think he wants to know more about programs for young people that not in the museums but outside, bring outside to the communities or schools.
Yeah. A large part of what the education department does is with school groups. So we have a special school and teacher programs. There's a group of people that work just with teachers and with schools and help them understand how to use art to better explain their curriculum. So they work directly with schools and with the teachers to kind of enhance their curriculum. They create those teacher resources like I shared with you, but they're in constant conversation with teachers. And we do teacher training at the museum. So we have something called Educator training where teachers sign up and then they come to the museum during the summer for a week, and they're trained on how to use the collection to educate their students. So we train teachers also. And then we have educators that go into schools. So it's not just that the school children are coming to the museum, but the educators are taking their expertise into the schools and into especially schools that are far away from the actual museum. So we go into what in New York we call the outer boroughs. So we go to other parts that are far away from the museum, into schools, and kind of integrate the work of the museum into the school curriculum. That's a very important part of what we do, connecting the school curriculum to the art and the objects in the museum. And there's a lot of outreach that we do with schools. It's something that we do throughout the year. So being part of the curriculum and the teaching of New York City public schools is very important. We also have internships that we give high school students. And we particularly target or try to bring in high school students that do not have the resources. There are several high schools that don't have the resources to come to the museum or to engage with the art. And so we particularly try to encourage those students to apply for internships at the Metropolitan Museum so that they can see that kind of connection, and they can even see it as a profession that they might want to pursue.
What do they do in the museum for the high school student who do internship in the museum?
So the high school students, they learn, so they have to choose a department that they would like to work in. And so it could be a curatorial department like Asian art or modern and contemporary art, or they can choose a conservation department like objects conservation or digital. And then they spend time with a supervisor in that department where they learn the work of that department, and they're given small projects to do. So if you're, for example, if they're in objects conservation, they'll be taught how to clean objects, how to clean metal objects, and they'll be given some projects to do. So they really understand the work of a museum professional. And then they also help plan teen programs. So they're the resource for Teens Take the Met, for Teen Fridays. So we use the high school interns to better understand what teens are interested in. And they help us plan those teen programs. And then they participate in organizing Teens Take the Met, for example. So it's both for us to understand what teens are thinking and currently interested in it. And it's also for the teens to understand museum work. If it's a profession that they want to go into, it gives them a better idea of what that profession looks like.
Sorry, I still muted. Thank you for the answer. That's interesting, and I think relating with schools, we have another. Oh, sorry. Relating with schools, I have you have another question from Agung Wijaya from Kantor Konservasi Keraton Yogyakarta. He's asking about what about programs provided in schools for visiting museums? Is there any programs like that in the US? And how do you make cooperations programs with local schools?
With local schools, basically, we have a group of people that work with the school board. So in New York, there's a Department of Education that controls all the public schools. So we work very closely with the school boards to connect with the various schools. And we prioritize schools that are in underserved communities. So when our educators go to schools, we make sure that those are schools that may not have art programs, or that have that have students that are unable to engage in with art. So we try to find where the need is most, and we try to fulfill that need. Many schools are underfunded, and so they tend to get rid of their art-based programming. And so we come in and try to fulfill that. But it comes from these collaborations we have with the Department of Education and with individual schools. That's how we kind of devise the curriculum and the programs. And like I said, we often have our teachers, our educators go into the schools and do teaching and workshop and art education in the schools. You know, they have presentations that they take with them, images of the art, and they teach in the school itself. So it's a big part. Our education department feels very strongly that the work of the museum is not just in the building, but in the community. And so a lot of what we do is in the community. We're always making programs that are in the community.
Interesting. There is also one question that is still related for with the previous sections. It is from Bayu from Dinas Kebudayaan, the Cultural Office of Jakarta, Jakarta History Museum. And thank you for these great programs. My question is, what is your suggestions for inviting young people to the museum? How do you do that, such as picking the target audience, making the MOUs for how many persons for one program, how many groups in a day, or how many persons in the service for this program? Thank you.
That's a good question. Our education department is quite large, and we have, the way we are divided is we have a group of people focusing on teaching and learning, another group of people focusing on sort of college and fellowship programs, which is higher education. The teaching and learning group basically focuses on K through 12 education, which is kindergarten through 12th grade. And then we have a third group that focuses on public programs, which is more adult learners. And so within these groups, they have been doing programs for a very long time. So they have a very good understanding of the needs of their audiences, how many people will respond to any given program invitation, what are the logistics within the museum. So those kind of concerns or those kind of approaches are very well run, because we just do so many that there's always an opportunity to learn from previous programs. So for example, we have this, like I said, we have these day-long festivals where we basically celebrated Lunar New Year recently. And the museum was a whole day celebration of the festival. So we invited a lot of partner institutions that work with young people across New York City, whether it's studios that are teaching dance or art making, calligraphy. We invited them to come into the museum and gave them a space where they can set up their own project. And we invited the audience to interact with them. So we also collaborate with organizations in New York that focus on young people. And we invite them to come into the museum and participate in these festivals. So that's another way that we do the outreach. But in terms of the MOUs or the logistics, you know, we run so many of these that we have a good handle on what the response rate is or how many people we think will attend. And we're always constantly learning from each event.
I think after several questions regarding more conceptual questions from Joel Behrens. He is asking that I'm really interested in how history shares. This cannot be the museum imparting frozen knowledge. Share their stories within and among such stories represented in museum spaces. I think what he's asking is more about how you involve or engage the youth audience to share stories in the museums, like sharing knowledge of the youth, sharing memories, things like that.
Right. So like I said, we have advisory groups, youth advisory groups, that they help us tell their stories. They share with us what is interesting to them, and we use that to attract other people of similar age. And then we also open up the museum to young people, whether it's collaborating with a group that works with poets or the group that works with singers. So we collaborate with other institutions. There are many such organizations in New York and the surrounding areas that work with younger audiences, whether it's dance or music, and we give them a space to showcase their work. So we both connect with young people and ask them to tell us what they're interested in. We have advisory groups, we have the Met Collective. These are ways to hear what young people want to know and to hear when they come into the museum. And then we also work with organizations that are more community-based organizations. And they bring their groups into the museum. So we give them a platform and we give them a voice to share their stories.
This is something we can elaborate more in Indonesia, that we have to provide platform for the youth to share stories in the museum. I think it is important because what we have is the objects from the past, and whether that object is still relevant for this contemporary society. So I think we have another questions more about back to more technical questions from Somlak. First of all, he said sorry for you if he missed your first part of talk, but he's wondering if you have touched upon if you have a mobile museum program at the MEP.
That's interesting. We don't really have a mobile museum, but we have educators that take museum information to different places. So we don't really take objects to different places, but we take images of the objects. So they do presentations, they do workshops, they do art making. I've seen mobile museums in India where they actually have objects in a bus that they take to various places. The Natural History Museum in New York has a mobile museum. But I think for the Met, because these objects are so valuable, and then there's also an insurance part because these objects are insured, I don't think it's feasible to kind of take the actual objects to various locations. So I guess the mobile aspect is more the knowledge that we share, and we take images of the objects with the hope that people will come back to the museum and actually see the objects in person. But I have seen that model very successfully in other places, yeah.
We have a comment from the Philippines that they have the mobile museum boxes at the National Museum of the Philippines.
Yeah, I've seen it in India too. It's very successful.
So it is mobile museum is like a loan box, or so you can loan it to the schools and communities?
I guess that's one model. The model I've seen is basically a museum in a bus. So they have objects that are in a bus that they can drive to, like a school district, and then the students come in and like interact with the objects and learn about them.
Okay. And I think there's another question, not really related to the Met, but to the museums in general in the US and also in the Met. Is museums providing a scholarship for young people to learn about art, culture, and history? Is it
Yeah.
common for museums to provide such scholarship?
Yes, we have internships that are funded. So you get paid, they're paid internships. If you're in college, you can apply. We have three groups of internships per year. So you can do a spring, a summer, or a fall internship if you're a college student. And we try very hard to give internships to college students that may not have kind of a natural affinity to art or to the Met, so they can be from any background, from any part of the US. They can even be international. Even international students can apply for internships at the Met that are paid. And then even the high school students are paid for their internships. We've realized that paying students for internships is very important in making it accessible. And so, especially if you're trying to attract underserved communities, it's very important that you offer them a paid internship, because otherwise they'll take other internships that are paid. So if you want to attract people into art and into this field, then we have to like be as competitive as other internships. So we've put a lot of effort into getting paid internships for students and for young people. I mean, a big part of the education program is to encourage young people to make museums into a career. And this is something that is, I find in my work across the globe, a big challenge, but a very important initiative. It's very important to bring young, motivated, educated people into museum work, because only then will museums thrive, and only then will art and cultural heritage be preserved. So I think all of us who work with institutions have to try very hard to encourage young people to see this as a career. It's a big challenge everywhere, but it's very important.
Yes, agree. It's a very big challenge, and it is interesting that you have a paid internship. So
Yeah.
it is also interesting because I think in Indonesia, usually having internship in the museums is not a paid job. I think it's because of from the school expect you to work somewhere for their grades. Unfortunately, we already have only 5 minutes left before we have to finish this talk. If you do have still questions, I think we can be, we still have time for one more questions. Oh yes, one question. Oh, it's from Megan. Can you speak briefly about the kinds of international collaborations you do in your work, and perhaps what opportunities might be available to Indonesian museum scholars and or other researchers? Maybe that's the last questions before we close this. Very interesting.
Great, yeah. So the kind of work that we do with international collaborations is we collaborate with other museums. So for example, we run a program where we encourage conservators who work in India to come to the Met. So we give them a fellowship, so they come to the Met and they get trained in conservation. So it's kind of mid-career training. And then we also have a very robust fellowship program that is open to scholars all over the world. You can be either art history or conservation or interdisciplinary studies. And the idea is that this is a way for the Met to understand what is happening in the field across the globe. So it's a year-long fellowship. You can apply for the fellowship, and it's a paid fellowship. You spend a year at the Met doing research on your own topic, but also benefiting from the museum and its expertise. We have many other scholarly and exchange programs. Like I said, we have an internship for college students, for high school students. Most of these programs are international. I don't know if the high school program is, but the college and the fellowship programs are international. I would recommend anyone who's interested, just go to our website. There's a lot of resources. If you go into the students and scholars section, there's lots of information on how to apply for these programs, and they're really international. We've had fellows and interns from every part of the globe, so it's definitely accessible to people from Indonesia. And I would encourage you to look through that, and if you have questions, you can email me. I'll be happy to connect you with the right people. But we really do want representation from every part of the globe, so we try as much to make it very accessible.
So thank you so much, Savita, for your talks and presentations. I myself inspired a lot and learned a lot from you today for creating teens programs. Probably Museum Chile have to shift a little bit also for teens, not only for just children. But I believe I saw in the participants name list, we have about hundreds people joining us today in Zoom alone. And also we have the live recording of YouTube. And from the Zoom, I recognize some names. Most of them are from Indonesian museums. So I have you all also as inspired as myself with this talk. So that's something we can do to create more programs for teens and in the museums in Indonesia. I'm giving back this floor to Megan. And thank you so much, Savita.
Thank you so much. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Bu Ajeng, Bu Savita. Let's all share a virtual round of applause for a really wonderfully engaging talk. Thank you so much. And thank you for letting us know about the so many kinds of opportunities that are available for Indonesian scholars, researchers, museum studies experts to be able to be involved with some of the programs at the Met. APHIS would love to help facilitate some of those connections. So thank you for sharing those resources with us. I will go ahead and bring us to a conclusion this evening. This is, of course, the conclusion to our first session of the Museums for the 21st Century webinar series. Once again, I want to thank our speaker, Savita Monie, moderator, Ajeng Arainikasih, translator, Anna, and all of the members of Tracing Patterns who have helped to organize this, as well as the APHIS team, members of the US Embassy in Jakarta for making this possible. If you enjoyed this event, please join us for the next session of the M21 webinars, which will take place on the 14th of February at 10 a.m. Western Indonesia time. The second webinar will focus on the subject of conservation to discuss growing trends in conservation practice, such as collaborative conservation and links between conservation and community. We will be joined at that time by guest speaker Ellen Perlson, professor at the University of California, Los Angeles in the UCLA Getty program in the conservation of cultural heritage and UCLA cultural materials conservation, as well as UCLA's Department of Information Studies. That session will explore pertinent challenges in conserving organic materials in hot and humid environments, which will be particularly pertinent for our community in a tropical climate of Indonesia. Finally, I want to thank you all, our audience, for joining us in this Zoom meeting on YouTube, as well as those who will be watching the recorded event later on. We are really thrilled to share this discussion with you and appreciate your participation and commitment to advancing education, conservation, and curatorial practices by being part of this Museum for the 21st Century program. On behalf of Tracing Patterns Foundation, the Smithsonian Institution Asian Cultural History Program, Institute Konservasi, Museum Ceria, and the American Institute for Indonesian Studies, Thank you all for joining. Terima kasih banyak sekali. And we look forward to seeing you at the next event on February 14th.